I wound up leaving Yale, I think retreating from my connection to Yale. And I've mentioned in our conversations that I consider myself now a reborn Yale. I didn't come back much. And I think it's true of good friends of mine who did not have much an involvement in the 70s and 80s, including my buddy Clyde Murphy, and including Charles Finch, Dr. Charles Finch, who I have so much admiration for. And at the top of the list is that he and Ellen have 7 kids. 7 kids, you know. And not only does he write books about Egypt and lead tours to Egypt, but he's a medical doctor, and he practices medicine. And then there was Clyde. And Clyde I owe so much to. What happened in my case was 2010, I went to my 40th reunion. And that is where I thought I was reborn. It was just so wonderful seeing the guys, and I reconnected with them in ways that I just had not in the late 60s when I was here. And I went back home just feeling refreshed. And then about a month later, my son calls me in Prospect Park, you know, jogging. He calls me, he said, Clyde just passed away. It was like an awakening I never had. And it was for that reason I began to reflect on the deaths that especially Charles and I had, and Clyde too, had talked about so frequently. And what I did was I went through the lists that are available to Yaleys. You can look at the, you know, and find out who died and when. And I did a calculation and found out we were dying at 3 times the rate. Now, granted, a sociologist would want a larger universe, but to me, it was very meaningful. It was very meaningful. And I must say, too, and I know there's some controversy about this and who he was, but it was very striking also that it was about a week after that article came out in 2011 in the Yale Alumni Magazine, I got the word that a fellow named Robert Peace was murdered. He was in the class of 2002. And I have with me the book called The Short Tragic Life of Robert Peace. Now, granted, he made a lot of mistakes in his life, but the point that I would want to make and leave with you is that I believe, you know, now and reflecting on 1970s and the late 60s, yeah, a lot has changed, but there's a lot also that has not changed. And I believe that there's a thing called the crisis of black male. And I think it's reflected in the mortality rates that we were talking about, but I think we've especially seen it over the past year in Ferguson and in my own hometown of New York City in the case of a fellow, Eric Garner, who was strangled by a police officer, caught on video, and the police officer is laughing afterwards, and the police officer still has not been arrested. So what I would say, I was very moved by what the representative of the alumni office said, and I didn't have his name in speaking. And I would leave you with that thought because it's important to me now in life since I'm working at a college and with young folk. And very few black guys, even though it's Brooklyn, New York, by the way. I taught a class at Medgar Evers in professional writing. There were 15 in the class, 14 black women and 1 guy. One guy, yeah. But what he said, and speaking to all of us, you have the ability to change lives on a global scale. So I would leave you with that thought, because I think in our own ways, with respect to this crisis that I'm pointing out here, I do think we have the ability to do something about it, ability that was given to us in large part by Yale, and I hope that in our own ways we proceed to do that. Thank you.
Part of